One of these donuts comes from a country most people have never eaten food from. The other one is a classic you have probably eaten 100 times. By the end of this journey, one of these nations is getting crowned the absolute best donut country in the entire world, and I do not think you're going to guess which one takes the title. Think about the humble donut for a second. It is a universal language, a blank canvas of fried dough that every culture on earth has attempted to perfect. But today we are setting up the ultimate cultural clash. We are pinning the undisputed heavyweight champion of fast food baking against an underdog rich with thousands of years of culinary history. Our journey begins in the heart of Los Angeles, at a legendary neighborhood donut shop that has been using the exact same secret recipe since 1962. We managed to convince the owner's grandson to let us behind the counter to reveal the one critical ingredient they have never told a single customer about. But we are not stopping there. From the palm trees of Southern California, we are flying over 7,000 miles across the Atlantic to the ancient, bustling streets of Tehran. In Iran, donuts are not even called donuts. They're known by a completely different name. Shaped into intricate patterns and infused with aromatic ingredients you have probably never imagined putting into a dessert before. We are tracking down a street vendor in Shiraz who triggers a neighborhood stampede, completely selling out his entire inventory in 11 minutes every single morning. We are uncovering a hidden gem in Isfahan where a single batch of cream-filled delicacies requires an exhausting 8-hour commitment. To make this a fair fight, we are also pushing the boundaries of American baking. We are testing a maple bacon donut in Portland that takes 2 full days of meticulous preparation to construct, featuring custom-rendered bacon candied in bourbon and brown sugar. And finally, we are heading to a ultra-sleek boutique pastry kitchen in Manhattan to try a $38 luxury creation that comes wrapped in actual shimmering sheets of edible 24-karat gold leaf. 6 extraordinary donuts, 2 wildly different countries, only one ultimate winner. Let us begin. Our first stop brings us to a quiet corner of Los Angeles, just as the city is transitioning into those dark, silent hours before dawn. The only light on the block comes from a faded, flickering neon sign that has guided hungry locals to this exact storefront for over 6 decades. This is the definition of an American institution. It has survived changing neighborhoods, shifting economic landscapes, and the rise of massive corporate donut chains, all by sticking to one core philosophy: never change the recipe and never cut corners. To help unpack the magic of this place, I brought along a local food writer named Danny, who has lived just 3 blocks away her entire life. Yet, like most people, she had never experienced the chaotic energy of a commercial bakery before the sun comes up. If you want to understand why this baseline score matters so much for the rest of our global competition, you need to understand that the donut we're about to watch them make is the direct rival to Iran's most famous traditional pastry. The techniques used here set the technical benchmark for everything that follows. Walking through the back door into the kitchen feels like stepping into a time capsule. The air is thick with the comforting, heavy aroma of hot flour, yeast, and ambient warmth. Standing over a massive wooden workbench is the owner himself, a man who has run this kitchen for 40 consecutive years. When we asked him why he still chooses to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning every single day, His response was a masterclass in dedication. He told us that the moment you stop waking up at 2 in the morning is the exact moment you stop serving real donuts. The foundation of everything here rests inside a giant industrial mixing tub. It is a massive mound of yeasted dough that has been quietly resting overnight. When you press your hand into it, the texture is shockingly soft, mimicking the feel of a premium down pillow. This is the secret luxury of time. This is a traditional yeasted dough, which means it relies entirely on a slow, controlled fermentation process to develop its structural integrity and complex flavor profile. During this extended resting period, the yeast consumes the simple sugars in the flour, releasing carbon dioxide gas that creates thousands of tiny, microscopic air pockets. This chemical reaction is what gives a classic American donut its signature lightness and open, airy crumb structure. While mass production chains use chemical leaveners and artificial dough conditioners to rush this process down to under an hour, this shop insists on an 18-hour minimum rest. If you have ever wondered why cheap commercial donuts taste flat and feel gummy, it is because they skip this crucial step. Once the dough has achieved perfect fermentation, the owner rolls it out across the flour-dusted wood with a heavy pin. Then he begins the rhythmic, hypnotic process of stamping out shapes using a classic metal ring cutter. If you look closely, you will notice a fascinating detail. The holes in the center are not perfectly uniform. Some are noticeably larger than others. When we asked about this variation, the owner explained that it is entirely intentional. A larger center hole increases the overall surface area of the donut, allowing a significantly higher volume of liquid glaze to coat the interior walls. A smaller hole creates a denser, more bread-like interior that retains moisture differently. Every single dimension of this pastry is calculated based on 60 years of trial, error, and customer feedback. Next comes the transformation phase. The fryer is a massive blackened steel basin powered by gas burners that emit a low constant roar. This machine is older than most modern pastry chefs, and it operates with a simple, unyielding precision. The cooking medium is pure, unblended vegetable oil. There are no fancy fat blends or secret grease formulas here. Instead, the magic relies entirely on strict temperature management. The oil must sit at exactly 365 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature drops even 5 degrees to 360, the dough will absorb the oil like a sponge, turning greasy and heavy. If it climbs to 370, the exterior will burn before the interior has a chance to expand and cook through. As we approach the final assembly, the owner finally pulls back the curtain on the one element he has kept hidden from the public. He reaches for a small, unmarked container on a back shelf to reveal his proprietary glaze base. While the vast majority of modern donut shops make their glaze by simply whisking powdered sugar and cold milk together, this recipe introduces a multi-step emulsification. They utilize warmed corn syrup combined with a precise measure of fine sea salt, which is completely dissolved into the warm liquid before any powdered sugar enters the mix. This molecular ordering changes everything. Salt cannot dissolve efficiently in cold sugar or dense fats. If you throw it in raw, you end up with microscopic, gritty pockets of saltiness. By dissolving it in a warm liquid base first, the savory note is distributed evenly across every single molecule of sugar. It acts as a flavor enhancer, rather than an independent taste, cutting through the intense sweetness and amplifying the rich, buttery notes of the fried dough. When the glaze is ready, it looks like liquid glass, shimmering under the harsh kitchen lights. The timing of the glaze application is down to a matter of seconds. The moment the golden puffed donuts are lifted from the boiling oil, they are transferred directly onto the glazing rack. The owner pours the warm glaze over them within 60 seconds of frying. This immediate contact is non-negotiable. When the dough is screaming hot, the starches on the surface are still open and highly absorbent. The glaze actually melts down into the upper layers of the crust, creating a microscopic, integrated candy-like shell. If you wait for the donut to cool down even slightly, the glaze will simply sit on top like thick, brittle frosting. Taking that first bite is a revelation. The exterior yields with a delicate, audible crackle, immediately followed by an interior that feels as light and delicate as fresh bread pudding. Because it is served warm, the fats remain fluid, giving the pastry an unparalleled richness that coats the palate without feeling heavy. It is the absolute highest expression of a classic American staple. To establish our official baseline for the entire competition, we evaluate the pastry using our 4-tier scoring system: taste, value, experience, and uniqueness, with each category carrying a maximum of 10 points. For taste, this execution easily earns a 9 out of 10. It is the definitive version of a glazed donut, executed with flawless technical precision. For value, priced at just $2.25 for a completely handcrafted, labor-intensive pastry, it secures another strong 9. The experience category lands at a 6.5. While our behind-the-scenes access was a masterclass in culinary heritage, a standard customer walking up to the counter gets a very traditional, no-frills interaction. Finally, for uniqueness, we have to settle on a 4.5. At its core, this is still a traditional glazed donut format that you can find in every city across the Western world. It is not trying to reinvent the wheel, it is simply trying to spin it perfectly. That brings the classic American glazed donut to a total baseline score of 29 out of 40 points. But before we could pack up our gear and catch our flight across the globe, the owner stopped us at the door with an unexpected story. He mentioned that his aging father had been stationed overseas decades ago and spent the rest of his life obsessing over a mysterious fried pastry he had eaten on a street corner. He could never remember the name of the dish, nor could he ever successfully recreate the spice blend in his American kitchen. He only remembered the distinct, intoxicating aroma that filled the air. As we listed off the ingredients we were preparing to hunt down in Iran, wild harvested saffron, crushed green cardamom pods, and distilled red rose water, the owner's eyes lit up. He asked us to promise to take a picture of whatever we found to show his 84-year-old father. With that emotional mission locked in, we loaded our bags and headed out toward the airport. Stepping off the plane after a grueling 7,000-mile journey brings an immediate shock to the senses. The crisp coastal air of Southern California is instantly replaced by the dry, high-altitude heat of Tehran, a sprawling metropolis framed by the dramatic, jagged peaks of the Alborz mountain range. This is a city where ancient history and fast-paced modern life collide on every street corner. To navigate this unfamiliar culinary landscape, I am joined by my friend Samira, who grew up walking these exact paths as a schoolgirl. As we dive deeper into the labyrinth of a bustling neighborhood market street, The first major cultural revelation becomes clear. In Iran, there is no direct linguistic equivalent for the word donut. They do not think of this food in the Western sense of a mass produced morning comfort food meant to be paired with a cup of black coffee. Instead, what we are hunting down belongs to an ancient lineage of ritualistic sweet fried doughs, prepared with a level of reverence and botanical complexity that is entirely foreign to Western baking traditions. The stakes for this round could not be higher. The handcrafted masterpiece we watched in Los Angeles set a massive technical benchmark with its 18-hour fermentation and precise glaze architecture, earning a highly respectable baseline score of 29 out of 40 points. But as we step across the threshold of a small, traditional bakery tucked into a stone-walled alleyway, the running score in our heads completely fades behind a wave of pure aroma. The air inside this kitchen does not just smell like hot oil and sugar, it carries a deeply intoxicating, almost hypnotic floral and herbaceous perfume. It is the unmistakable scent of distilled red rosewater and freshly cracked green cardamom pods. For Samira, this aroma triggers an instant wave of nostalgia, transportive and powerful, evoking memories of every major family milestone, wedding, and celebration from her childhood. For someone experiencing it for the first time, it feels less like entering a bakery and more like walking into an artisanal apothecary. Standing behind a worn marble counter is the shopkeeper, an elderly woman whose family has operated a fryer on this exact street corner for generations. Through Samira's translation, she explains that crafting this traditional delicacy requires an absolute rejection of modern shortcuts. The foundation of her recipe relies on three pillars: carefully selected spices, a natural coloring agent, and an immense amount of patience. The process begins with the dry ingredient blend, and the first major surprise is the introduction of ground turmeric directly into the flour mixture. In Western kitchens, turmeric is strictly reserved for savory stews, curries, or savory rice dishes. Here, however, a precise pinch is added to the sweet dough mix. It is not intended to impart a heavy, earthy flavor. Rather, it functions as a natural pigment. The raw dough instantly takes on a vibrant golden yellow hue that sets it visually apart from the pale off-white appearance of standard American yeasted doughs. But the true soul of this pastry rests on an ingredient that is legally and economically classified as a luxury item. The shopkeeper reaches for a small, heavily secured metal tin and carefully extracts a tiny cluster of deep crimson threads. This is wild harvested Iranian saffron. By weight, high-grade saffron is arguably the most expensive agricultural product on the planet, frequently trading at prices that rival or exceed the value of actual gold. Each individual thread is the delicate, hand-plucked stigma of a specific purple crocus flower that blooms for only 2 weeks out of the entire year, requiring tens of thousands of blossoms to yield a single pound of spice. Rather than throwing the raw threads directly into the mixer, where they would fail to distribute evenly, the shopkeeper utilizes an ancient extraction technique. She drops the crimson threads into a small porcelain bowl of precisely warmed water. Instantly, a captivating molecular transformation occurs. In slow motion, the water begins to bloom, bleeding a deep, radiant orange-red hue outward from the floating threads. As the liquid infuses, it releases an incredibly complex bouquet of earth, honey, and subtle hay-like notes. This vibrant golden liquid is poured directly into the mixing bowl, binding the flour, eggs, and ground cardamom into a rich aromatic dough. Once the dough has achieved the perfect elasticity, the assembly process diverges completely from the ring-cut formats of the West. There are no automated stampers or steel cookie cutters in this kitchen. Instead, the shopkeeper shapes every single piece entirely by hand, manipulating the dough with a speed and dexterity that can only be achieved through a lifetime of daily repetition. She rolls the golden dough into thin, uniform strands, then deftly twists them into intricate, interlocking knots and small, dense, spherical balls. This shaping process carries a beautiful cultural significance. The shopkeeper explains that her grandmother taught her this exact twisting pattern. And in this region of Iran, every baking family utilizes a slightly different variant of the knot. Some loop the dough twice, others twist it 3 times, and some fold the ends inward in a specific configuration. To a trained local eye, the physical shape of the fried dough functions as a literal signature. You can identify exactly which family kitchen produced a specific batch just by examining the architecture of the twist, much like recognizing a close friend's unique handwriting. In a world where global fast food relies on absolute uniformity, this pastry embraces the beautiful variations of human touch. The frying phase introduces another layer of sensory brilliance. The cooking vessel is a simple gas-fired steel basin, but the oil inside has been pre-infused with crushed cardamom pods. As the shaped dough knots are gently dropped into the bubbling liquid, the kitchen fills with a low, rhythmic sizzling sound. Almost immediately, a fascinating visual cue takes place. The turmeric and saffron locked within the raw dough begin to bleed their natural golden pigments outward into the surrounding oil, tinting the entire fryer a shimmering shade of brilliant amber. The shopkeeper does not rely on digital timers or industrial temperature probes to tell her when the oil is ready. Instead, she monitors the exact rate of this color release. If the oil changes shade too quickly, it indicates the heat is dangerously high and will scorch the exterior. If the color bleeds sluggishly, the oil is too cold and the pastry will become grease-logged. The changing color of the oil itself functions as her living thermometer. The moment the knots achieve a perfectly uniform, deep golden brown crust, they're lifted from the boiling fat using a long wire skimmer. But instead of being subjected to a thick, liquid sugar glaze like the donut we tested in Los Angeles, these hot pastries are immediately transferred into a large wooden bowl filled with a dry, multi-textured coating. The mixture consists of fine granulated sugar, intensely green crushed Persian pistachios, and highly aromatic fragments of dried red rose petals. Because the dough is screaming hot straight from the fryer, the ambient heat partially melts the surface sugars, causing the crystalline mixture to fuse directly onto the exterior crust without fully dissolving. This creates a fascinating dual-layered texture. It is a dry, tactile coating that preserves the structural crunch of the nuts and the delicate flake of the flower petals, offering a stark contrast to the slick, glass-like fluid glazes found on Western pastries. Slicing one of these finished knots open reveals a stunning internal architecture. The cross-section exposes a dense, vibrant golden orange interior that looks remarkably like a cooked egg yolk, completely devoid of the pale, airy, pocketed structure of an American yeast donut. Taking a bite is an entirely new culinary experience. The exterior yields with a firm, biscuit-like snap, leading into a center that feels beautifully substantial, almost like a cross between a traditional cake donut and a premium shortbread cookie. The flavor profile is a masterclass in balance. The intense floral sweetness of the rosewater and the bright citrusy warmth of the cardamom hit the palate first, but they are immediately reined in by the complex, slightly bitter and earthy undertones of the saffron. The crushed pistachios provide a distinct clean nuttiness and a brilliant textural contrast that keeps the entire experience from feeling overly sweet or heavy. It is a profoundly sophisticated dessert that challenges every preconceived notion of what fried dough can be. To maintain total fairness across our global journey, we evaluate this Iranian masterpiece using the exact same four-tier Atlas scoring system, capping each category at 10 points. When it comes to taste, this execution achieves a spectacular 9.25 out of 10. The flavor combination is undeniably brilliant, though the highly aromatic presence of rosewater could be slightly polarizing for a Western palate unaccustomed to floral profiles. For value, this pastry secures a flawless, uncontested 10 out of 10. When converted to American currency, this entirely handcrafted, labor-intensive delicacy, loaded with expensive saffron and pistachios, costs the equivalent of just 40 cents. For experience, the historic atmosphere of the market, the sensory journey of the color-changing oil, and the deep cultural connection earn a strong 8.75. Finally, for uniqueness, this pastry scores an absolute 10 out of 10. From its handwriting-like structural shapes to its botanical ingredient profile, it represents a completely independent evolution of baking arts. This brings the traditional Iranian saffron cardamom knot to a staggering total score of 38 out of 40 points. This is not just a strong showing, it places Iran a massive 9 points ahead of the American baseline, completely dominating the first round of the competition. But the emotional weight of this culinary clash was about to intensify. Standing outside the shop in the cooling afternoon air, I pulled out my phone to fulfill the promise made to the shop owner back in Los Angeles. I snapped a high-resolution close-up photograph of the steaming golden knot, ensuring the fragments of rose petals and the vibrant yellow interior crumb were clearly visible under the natural sunlight. Along with the image, I typed out a detailed description of the exact spice profile we had just experienced: the wild saffron, the distilled rosewater, and the crushed green cardamom. I hit send, launching the message across 7,000 miles of ocean, completely unsure if these specific ingredients would mean anything to an 84-year-old veteran who had been chasing a forgotten culinary memory for over half a century. With that open loop hanging in the air, we packed our camera gear and prepared to catch our next flight, knowing that America desperately needed an extraordinary culinary response to close this massive point gap. Our search for an American comeback takes us to the Pacific Northwest, landing in the rain-dusted, fiercely competitive culinary landscape of Portland, Oregon. If the traditional bakeries of Iran rely on thousands of years of cultural heritage, the high-end pastry shops of Portland thrive on a philosophy of radical reinvention, culinary maximalism, and artisanal excess. We are standing outside a sleek, trendy storefront where an eager queue of locals has already formed along the sidewalk, entirely unfazed by the early morning chill. They are all waiting for a single notorious creation that pushes the absolute boundaries of time, technique, and flavor pairing. A maple bacon donut that requires an exhausting 2-day preparation process to execute. Walking through the back doors into this production kitchen reveals an environment that looks part bakery and part high-end smokehouse. The pastry chefs here do not start their morning by mixing flour. Instead, they start by preparing massive trays of meat. To understand the scale of this operation, you have to look at the topping first, because the bacon component alone requires more time and labor than most corporate chains spend on an entire batch of dough. The chef begins by sourcing thick-cut premium strips of cured pork belly, arranging them meticulously across elevated wire baking racks to ensure total air circulation. Then comes the precision candying process. The meat is heavily coated in a proprietary dry rub consisting of dark brown sugar, freshly cracked black pepper, and a deliberate pinch of cayenne pepper. The trays are slid into low-heat ovens where they undergo a painstaking 2.5-hour slow roasting process. During this extended bake, the pork fat slowly renders out, crisping the proteins while the brown sugar liquefies and undergoes intense caramelization. As the bacon cools, the molten sugar solidifies into a shiny, brittle, glass-like candy coating that seals the smoky fat inside. To elevate the profile even further, the strips are brushed with a reduction of small batch oak-aged bourbon, adding a deep, woodsy complexity that cuts straight through the intense salinity of the pork. While the candied bacon is resting, the focus shifts to the structural foundation of the pastry itself. Unlike the light, airy yeast dough we experienced in Los Angeles, this Portland creation utilizes an entirely different family of baking science: the old-fashioned cake donut format. This distinction changes everything. A yeast donut relies on biological fermentation to create rising gases, resulting in a flexible bread-like cell structure. A cake donut, conversely, relies on chemical leaveners like premium baking powder and an enriched batter loaded with sour cream and high-fat butter. The resulting dough is far denser, mimicking the rich, moist composition of a premium pound cake. The magic of the old-fashioned style occurs the moment the chilled rings of cake batter are dropped into the commercial fryer. As the batter hits the hot oil, the chemical leaveners react violently to the thermal shock, expanding outward at a rapid rate. Because the exterior crust sets almost instantly in the heat, the rapidly expanding interior forces the surface of the donut to split open, naturally forming a ring of deep, jagged, completely asymmetrical cracks and crevices across the top of the pastry. To an untrained eye, these rough, broken fissures might look like a production mistake. In reality, this cracking pattern is the exact hallmark of a masterfully executed old-fashioned donut. The chef explains that these jagged valleys are a deliberate architectural feature. They are designed to dramatically increase the overall surface area of the pastry, transforming the exterior into a high-performance delivery system for the glaze that follows. The synchronization of the glazing process requires absolute split-second timing. The moment the cracked cake donuts emerge from the fryer, shimmering with heat, they are transferred directly to an assembly station. The chef completely submerges the hot pastry into a deep basin of artisanal maple glaze, crafted from pure Gruyere dark maple syrup harvested from New England forests. Because the donut is still incredibly hot, a powerful thermodynamic suction occurs. The porous, cracked interior valleys acts like a sponge, drawing the fluid maple glaze deep down into the core of the cake, creating rich, marbled pockets of sweetness beneath the surface. Before the glaze has a chance to cool and set, the chef aggressively presses the crumbled shards of the bourbon candied bacon directly into the sticky surface, ensuring every square millimeter of the cracked architecture is completely anchored with meat. The final touch is a delicate, precise dusting of large crystal, hand harvested, flaky sea salt. Taking a bite of this multi layered creation is an intense, almost overwhelming experience for the senses. The initial texture is a brilliant collision of contrasts. The brittle, shatteringly crisp crunch of the candied bacon hits first, immediately followed by the dense, moist, melt in your mouth crumb of the fried sour cream cake batter. Flavor-wise, it is a brilliantly engineered assault on the palate. It triggers every single taste receptor simultaneously. The deep, woody sweetness of the dark maple glaze is instantly countered by the intense, smoky salinity of the pork belly. Just as the richness threatens to become overpowering, the fiery kick of the cayenne pepper and the sharp, clean bite of the flaky sea salt cut through the fat, cleansing the palate and demanding another bite. It is a spectacular demonstration of modern American culinary indulgence, elevating comfort food into a high art form through sheer force of labor and flavor intensity. When we place this Portland heavyweight on the Atlas scoreboard, the numbers reveal a fierce battle for American redemption. For taste, this highly complex, sweet, and savory masterpiece easily secures a phenomenal 9.5 out of 10. The execution of the candying process and the moisture retention of the cake crumb are completely flawless. However, the value category suffers a significant hit, landing at a 6 out of 10. Because of the intense 2-day timeline, specialized ingredients, and small batch artisanal labor, a single donut costs a steep $5.50. A price point that shifts it firmly out of the realm of everyday accessibility. For experience, the vibrant energy of the Portland street line, and the opportunity to watch the spectacular cracking process in the fryer earn a solid 8.5. Finally, for uniqueness, it receives a 6.75 out of 10. While the maple bacon flavor combination is a well-established staple of modern American boutique baking, this specific execution, driven by bourbon candied lamination and intentional structural cracking, represents the absolute pinnacle of the format. This brings the 2-day Portland Maple Bacon Doughnut to a total score of 35.75 out of 40 points. While this score marks a massive improvement for the United States, showcasing the sheer power of American culinary innovation, it still fails to dethrone Iran's reigning champion's score of 38. The competition is shaping up to be an absolute thriller, and as the sun begins to set over the Pacific Northwest, we prepare to cross the globe once again, heading deeper into the ancient heart of Iran to see if their next creation can sustain their legendary lead.
Leaving the bustling metropolis of Tehran behind, we journey south into the historic heart of Persia, arriving in the breathtaking city of Isfahan. Known for centuries as half the world due to its spectacular Islamic architecture, magnificent grand palaces, and sprawling covered bazaars, this city treats culinary traditions not merely as a way to feed people, but as a form of high artistic expression. We are seeking out a tiny, generational pastry kitchen hidden deep within the stone labyrinth of the ancient bazaar. Located just a short walk from the historic Nakshi Jahan Square, here they produce a legendary cream-filled delicacy that has locals queuing long before the morning shutters are unlocked. This is the absolute opposite of fast food. The master baker who runs this shop explains that creating a single batch of these cream-filled masterpieces requires an exhausting, uninterrupted 8-hour commitment every single day. If you skip a single minute or attempt to rush the process, the entire batch is ruined and thrown away. To understand why this 8-hour timeline is so non-negotiable, you have to look at the construction of the pastry cream first. In the West, commercial cream-filled donuts are almost always loaded with instant custard powders, artificial vanilla flavorings, and heavy corn syrups that can be whipped up in a mechanical mixer in less than 10 minutes. In this Isfahan kitchen, the filling is a complex, slowly reduced dairy reduction that takes up the first 4 hours of the baker's morning. The process begins with fresh, raw, unpasteurized milk sourced from local farms, which possesses an exceptionally high butterfat content. This milk is poured into a massive copper cauldron that has been seasoned by decades of continuous use. The baker lights a low wood fire beneath the copper pot, introducing a subtle ambient whisper of wood smoke into the air. The milk is brought to an incredibly gentle simmer, and the baker stands over the cauldron with a massive wooden paddle, stirring continuously for hours on end. The goal here is controlled evaporation. By slowly simmering away the excess water content without ever letting the milk scorch or boil over, the liquid naturally concentrates, transforming into a thick, velvety, and intensely sweet dairy base. Once the milk is reduced by exactly half its original volume, the flavor infusion begins. The baker introduces 3 distinct elements into the simmering reduction, creating a molecular layering of flavor that is deeply complex. First comes a generous pour of pure, double-distilled rose water extracted from the mountain roses of nearby Kashan. Unlike standard commercial rose water, which can taste synthetic and reminiscent of soap, this artisanal distillate carries a soft, fruity, and deeply elegant top note. Next, the baker crushes whole pods of green cardamom using a heavy stone mortar and pestle, throwing the coarse seeds into the hot milk where they release their bright citrusy and medicinal essential oils. Finally, the crown jewel of the filling is added, a concentrated elixir of pure saffron. The baker takes a massive handful of ground saffron powder, places it into a glass bowl, and covers it with literal blocks of solid ice. As the ice melts over the course of an hour, it extracts the pigment and flavor compounds from the spice far more gently than boiling water ever could. This cold-brewed saffron liquid is poured into the reduced milk, immediately turning the white dairy into a brilliant, glowing, pastel yellow custard. While the saffron cream is placed into an underground stone cooling cellar to chill and thicken naturally over another 3 hours, the focus shifts to the dough. This is a highly specialized enriched yeast dough that requires 2 separate proofing stages. The baker incorporates a significant amount of cultured butter and fresh yogurt into the flour mixture. The lactic acid present in the yogurt acts as a natural dough conditioner, breaking down the tough gluten strands and ensuring the final fried pastry achieves an almost impossible level of tenderness. Once the initial mixing is complete, the dough is left to rise in a warm corner of the kitchen for 2 hours. It is then punched down, hand-kneaded with rhythmic precision, and divided into small, perfect spheres. These spheres undergo a second cold-proofing stage inside wooden boxes lined with damp linen cloth, allowing the yeast to continue fermenting at a drastically slowed rate. This double-proof method is the reason why the interior of the pastry develops a beautifully uniform, microscopic cell structure that can support the immense weight of the heavy saffron cream without collapsing. The frying phase is a masterclass in ancient temperature control. The baker does not have access to digital fryers or automated timers. Instead, he judges the readiness of the oil by dropping a single unpopped cardamom seed into the hot fat. If the seed sinks and sits silent, the oil is too cold. If it violently snaps and burns, the oil is dangerously hot. But if the seed immediately rises to the surface, surrounded by a gentle, steady halo of tiny bubbles while releasing an instantaneous puff of fragrant steam, the temperature is absolutely perfect. The proof dough spheres are slipped into the oil one by one. Because of the high sugar and dairy content within the dough itself, the exterior caramelizes beautifully, taking on a deep dark mahogany brown color within just 2 minutes per side. As the hot, golden spheres are pulled from the fryer, they are allowed to cool completely. This is a critical divergence from the American style of glazing. If you inject a dense, heavy pastry cream into a scorching hot donut, the ambient heat will melt the fats within the dairy, causing the custard to split, turn watery, and ruin the interior texture. Once the pastries reach room temperature, the baker uses a long, thin wooden skewer to pierce a single clean channel directly into the center of the dough. The chilled saffron cream is transferred into a heavy cloth piping bag fitted with a hand-forged brass nozzle. The baker inserts the nozzle deep into the pastry and squeezes with immense force. You can actually watch the exterior walls of the dough expand and tauten as the dense, golden custard packs into every single interior air pocket. The finale is simple but striking. The filled opening is plugged with a single whole grain pistachio kernel, sealing the luxurious cream inside. Taking a bite of this Isfahan masterpiece requires a moment's pause. The physical weight of the pastry alone tells you that you are dealing with something substantial. The initial bite breaks through a remarkably crisp, dark exterior crust that offers a brief, satisfying resistance before yielding to an interior crumb that feels completely saturated with moisture. Then the filling erupts. The cold saffron cream rushes across the tongue, delivering an instantaneous wave of rich, velvety dairy flavor that feels profoundly luxurious. The temperature contrast between the room temperature dough and the chilled custard center creates a beautiful sensory dynamic. Taste-wise, it is an absolute symphony. The intense buttery richness of the reduced milk is perfectly balanced by the clean, floral lift of the rosewater, while the saffron provides a deep, aristocratic, and slightly earthy undertone that anchors the sweetness. The single pistachio at the end provides a brilliant, crunchy punctuation mark to an incredibly sophisticated bite of food. Evaluating this ancient delicacy on our global Atlas scoreboard reveals just how close this international competition has become. For taste, this 8-hour labor of love earns an unparalleled 9.75 out of 10. The depth of flavor achieved through the slow reduction of the milk and the cold extraction of the saffron is nothing short of world-class pastry. Engineering. For value, it scores another magnificent 9.5. Despite the immense timeline, the artisanal labor, and the high cost of the premium saffron and cardamom utilized, a single cream-filled masterpiece costs the equivalent of just 75 cents in American currency. The experience category lands at an 8.5. Eating this pastry on a wooden bench while listening to the rhythmic sounds of metalworkers and spice merchants inside a centuries-old Persian bazaar is a memory that stays with you forever. Finally, for uniqueness, it locks in a 9 out of, representing a complete mastery of slow-cooked dairy filling that is virtually non-existent in the fast-paced landscape of Western baking. This brings the Isfahan saffron cream-filled masterpiece to a monumental total score of 36.75 out of 40 points. While it does not quite eclipse the historic 10 out of 10 uniqueness score of Tehran's saffron cardamom knot, it solidifies Iran's absolute dominance in this competition, leaving the United States facing a massive uphill battle as we prepare to head into our final climactic rounds. Our search for an American response to Iran's overwhelming lead brings us directly into the heart of global luxury and culinary ambition, Manhattan, New York. If the street corners of Shiraz and the ancient alleys of Isfahan treat pastry as an enduring cultural anchor, the high-end pastry laboratories of New York City treat it as avant-garde theater, a status symbol and a high-stakes engineering challenge. We stand outside a sleek, minimalist storefront where the aesthetic is closer to a high-fashion boutique or a sterile gemstone vault than a traditional bakery. Here, there are no flour-dusted countertops or worn marble surfaces. Instead, pastry chefs in pristine, clinical whites operate under precision lighting to craft a single, hyper-exclusive creation that has captured global attention. A $38 24-karat gold leaf laminated croûte-style masterpiece. To help deconstruct the immense technicality of this round, I am joined by Priya, an elite pastry chef who understands the unforgiving physics of high-end baking. Stepping into the kitchen reveals a production process rooted deeply in classical French technique, modified extensively for the modern American luxury market. The foundation of this pastry rejects standard dough entirely, opting instead for a highly enriched brioche dough packed with an extraordinary volume of premium cultured butter and fresh eggs. As Priya points out, brioche is notoriously volatile. If the kitchen temperature fluctuates by even a single degree, the fat will break from the dough, ruining its structural integrity before it ever touches the oil. To mitigate this, the dough is proofed in a specialized, climate-controlled chamber held at exactly 78 degrees Fahrenheit for 14 hours. Once the initial proof is complete, the chefs begin the grueling process of lamination. This is a technique completely foreign to the traditional Iranian methods we witnessed. The chefs repeatedly roll and fold blocks of chilled butter into the brioche dough, creating hundreds of alternating, paper-thin layers of fat and flour. It is an exceedingly slow process requiring immense skill, ensuring that when the pastry finally hits the commercial fryer, a spectacular thermodynamic reaction occurs. The moisture within the laminated butter layers instantly vaporizes into steam, forcing the individual layers of dough to separate, puff, and crisp independently in the bubbling oil. Watching it fry is like watching a golden rose bloom in slow motion, revealing a towering, multi-layered internal architecture. The opulence continues with the filling and final ornamentation. Instead of a standard custard, the interior valleys of the hot pastry are aggressively injected with a rich pastry cream infused with genuine Tahitian vanilla bean, an agricultural luxury known for its complex, fruity top notes that carry distinct whispers of cherry and anise. Then comes the final, breathless step that defines the pastry's staggering price point. Using specialized static-free wooden tweezers, a chef delicately hoists an impossibly thin sheet of genuine edible 24-karat gold leaf. The gold is so structurally fragile that a single stray breath will cause it to tear or dissolve into dust. With absolute stillness, the sheet is laid across the glossy surface of the pastry, adhering instantly to form a shimmering, metallic armor that catches the light like a museum artifact. Taking a bite of this Manhattan heavyweight is a masterclass in textural indulgence. The exterior shatters with a loud, clean crunch of a world-class croissant, immediately giving way to the plush, buttery interior layers that melt away under the rich, aromatic wave of the Tahitian vanilla cream. As Priya frankly notes, the gold leaf adds absolutely zero flavor or texture to the palate. It is pure, unadulterated culinary theater. You are paying for the staggering labor of lamination, the scarcity of the vanilla, and the psychological thrill of consuming literal currency. On our global Atlas scoreboard, this New York Titan delivers a fierce but deeply conflicted performance. For taste, the sheer brilliance of the lamination technique and the exceptional quality of the cream earn a phenomenal 9.5 out of 10. For experience, the precise high-fashion artistry of the gold leaf application secures a strong 9. For uniqueness, borrowing the rigorous mechanics of laminated croissant dough for a fried pastry format yields an impressive 8.75. However, the value category suffers a devastating near-fatal blow, plummeting to a 3.75 out of 10. At $38 for a single pastry, it stands as an elite luxury entirely detached from the egalitarian, comfort food roots of the donut medium. This brings the New York Gold Leaf Cronut to a total score of 31 out of 40 points. Strongest showing yet, but still mathematically short of reclaiming the crown. To close this international journey, we fly back across the oceans, leaving the hyper-polished luxury of Manhattan behind to descend into the sun-drenched ancient poetry of Shiraz, Iran. If our journey so far has focused on established brick-and-mortar institutions, our final stop subverts the entire competition. We are standing on a chaotic, air-dusted street corner at the crack of dawn, tracking down a legendary independent street vendor who operates out of a singular, highly weathered wooden cart. There are no social media marketing campaigns or artisanal signs here, yet a massive line of local laborers, schoolchildren, and commuters has already formed, completely swarming the sidewalk. This vendor achieves a feat that would make any Western restaurateur envious. Every single morning, his entire inventory sells out completely in less than 15 minutes. Through Samira's translation, the vendor explains the punishing simplicity of his life's work. He wakes up alone in his home at midnight to mix and knead a massive tub of simple yeast dough, allowing it to undergo a slow, cool fermentation before loading it onto his cart and wheeling it to this exact corner by 5 o'clock in the morning. He has repeated this exact sequence every single day for 11 years. Watching him work is like watching a blur of pure muscle memory. His hands move with a hypnotic, mechanical speed that defies human biology, pinching off small spheres of dough and dropping them into a tiny, gas-fired portable basin of boiling oil. There are no luxury flavor infusions here, no saffron, no rosewater, no Tahitian vanilla, and certainly no gold leaf. The vendor proudly states that his recipe consists solely of flour, water, yeast, oil, and a final, aggressive dusting of fine white granulated sugar. But as the piping hot, golden spheres are pulled from the oil and instantly tossed in the sugar, the true magic of the street corner becomes clear. Accepting one of these pastries straight from the vendor's hands is a transcendent experience. It is screamingly hot, forcing you to toss it between your hands before taking a bite. The initial crunch of the exterior sugar crystals instantly gives way to an interior crumb that is so impossibly light, cloud-like, and airy that it feels almost hollow, a beautiful pocket of hot yeasted air that dissolves instantly on the tongue. For Samira, a single bite triggers a profound emotional response, transporting her instantly back 15 years to the carefree morning walks of her childhood. It is food stripped of pretension, relying entirely on the unstoppable culinary alchemy of immediate freshness, perfect frying temperature, and historical repetition. Midway through the segment, an extraordinary moment occurs. My phone buzzes violently in my pocket. It is a direct message from the elderly bakery owner back in Los Angeles. He has sent a digitized, faded black and white photograph taken over half a century ago, depicting an old street vendor's cart on a dusty Middle Eastern sidewalk. Holding the screen up next to the vendor's wooden cart reveals an identical architectural match, the exact same shape, the same rapid hand movements, the same steaming metal basin. The open loop has officially closed. Across 7,000 miles and 60 years of separation, we have successfully located the exact living culinary ghost that an 84-year-old American veteran has been chasing for his entire adult life. When we place this 15-cent street masterpiece on the Atlas scoreboard, the numbers solidify a historic outcome. For taste, the flawless, ultralight execution of the hot dough earns an excellent 8.75. For experience, standing on a vibrant, historic street corner watching an entire neighborhood share breakfast together secures a perfect 10 out of 10. For value, at a price point that renders it virtually free, it secures another undeniable 10. Finally, for uniqueness, While fried dough and sugar exist worldwide, the immense cultural context and unyielding preservation of the format earn an 8.5. This brings the Shiraz street vendor Doughnut to an exceptional total 37.5 out of 40 points. Sitting down in a quiet space to calculate the final global averages, the reality of this culinary clash is stark and undeniable. The final scoreboard viewed United States overall average, 30-25-41, classic glazed. Maple bourbon bacon, Portland, 37.53. Gold leaf cronut, N 31-point Iran overall average, 38-42-41. Saffron cardamom masterpiece, Isfahan, 36. 75.3. Street vendor sugar, 37.50 winner. Iran by a dominant margin of 8-7 to Sinhin points. This is one of the most one-sided clean sweeps in the history of our channel, with the lowest scoring Iranian pastry completely outperforming the highest scoring American. Luxury creation. When you strip away the numbers, the true story of this journey rests on the intersection of value, time, and human heritage. The American pastries we encountered are absolute marvels of modern culinary innovation, driven by brilliant minds pushing the boundaries of what comfort food can be through sheer labor, complex lamination, and daring flavor profiles. They are dazzling, but they are young, and their high price points reflect the heavy cost of specialized artisanal production. Iran's victory, conversely, is anchored in the unstoppable power of generational refinement. These recipes have spent centuries undergoing quiet, unwritten iteration, passed down through families who treat the exact twist of a knot or the reduction of fresh milk as an unalterable signature of identity. They have achieved absolute perfection of form, delivering unmatched botanical complexity and staggering freshness to their communities. For equivalent of mere pennies, America builds spectacular monuments to modern pastry, but Iran has woven the art of fried dough directly into the enduring fabric of daily human life.